The power is out. It's the middle of winter, and your thermostat is just a decorative wall ornament now. Before you start burning your furniture, which, by the way, some people have actually done, there are smarter options. Options that people used for generations before electricity became the answer to everything. These are the 10 forgotten DIY heating methods that work during a blackout. Method 10. The terracotta pot heater. This one looks almost too simple to take seriously. 2 terracotta flower pots, a few tea light candles, some bolts and nuts, and a metal tray. That's it. The idea is straightforward. The inner pot traps the heat from the candles, the outer pot acts as a shell, and the whole thing radiates warmth into the room gradually. The science behind it is real, even if the setup looks like something you'd find at a craft fair. Terracotta is a porous clay material that absorbs heat and releases it slowly over time. A standard tea light burns for roughly 3 to 5 hours and produces about 30 watts of heat energy. 2 or 3 of them stacked under a double pot system can warm a small enclosed space, think a bathroom, a tent, or a car, noticeably within an hour. The bolt and nut assembly runs through the drainage hole in the bottom of both pots, separating them so air can circulate. The candles sit on the metal tray beneath. The outer pot sits over the inner one, and you want a small gap at the top. That's where the warm air escapes. A few practical notes. This is not a whole house heater. Nobody is keeping a 4-bedroom home warm with tea lights. But for one small room, especially if you've sealed the drafts and hung blankets over the doors, it can make a real difference. Keep it on a non-flammable surface, never leave it unattended, and make sure the room has at least some ventilation. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless, and it doesn't care that you were just trying to stay warm. The terracotta pot heater gained renewed attention during power outages in the 2000s, particularly in Northern Europe, where winters can be brutal and where the method has roots going back centuries in peasant households that used clay vessels near open hearths for the same heat retention purpose. One thing people consistently underestimate is room preparation. Sealing a room properly before relying on a modest heat source turns a marginal situation into a manageable one. Draft snakes along door bottoms, towels stuffed into gaps, blankets tacked over windows. These are the things that determine whether a tea light heater feels like it's doing something or feels like a joke. A well-sealed room retains heat. A leaky one doesn't, no matter what's burning inside it. The heater is only half the equation. Method 9. Alcohol stoves. Long before the camp stove was a retail product, people were burning denatured alcohol in shallow metal containers to cook food and heat small spaces. Alcohol stoves have been used by hikers, military units, and sailors for well over a century, and they remain one of the most reliable DIY heat sources available because the fuel is cheap, widely available, and burns cleanly. The simplest version is made from 2 aluminum soda cans. The outer bottom of one can becomes the base, the inner bottom of the other becomes the top, and holes are punched around the rim to allow the alcohol vapor to escape and burn. When lit, you get a steady, controllable blue flame that produces genuine, usable heat. Denatured alcohol, also sold as methylated spirits, is the standard fuel. It burns at around 1090 degrees Fahrenheit and leaves almost no residue. Isopropyl alcohol at 91% or higher works as well, though it burns slightly cooler and leaves a small amount of water vapor. Ethanol works too. What you want to avoid is anything with added chemicals or colorants. For heating purposes, a slightly larger format works better than the tiny backpacker version. Some people use small tin cans, Altoid tins, tuna cans, with a wick made from fiberglass or cotton rope soaked in the alcohol. This version burns longer and more steadily and can be used with a simple pot stand to also heat water or food on top. The output is modest, roughly equivalent to a strong candle cluster, but consistent. In a sealed room, a well-fueled alcohol burner can maintain a temperature several degrees above outdoor conditions for hours. Store extra fuel in sealed metal containers, away from the heat source, and keep a lid nearby to smother the flame if needed. Unlike gas, you can't just turn an alcohol fire off instantly, so preparation matters. One overlooked advantage of alcohol stoves is how easily they can double as a cooking platform. A simple 3-point pot stand made from metal rods or stones raises a small pot or pan above the flame at the right height for efficient heat transfer. During a blackout that stretches into a second or third day, Having the ability to heat water for food, for coffee, or just for something warm to drink becomes more important than most people anticipate. Warmth from the inside out is real. Hot food in a cold house does more for morale and core body temperature than most people give it credit for. Method 8. Rocket stoves. The name sounds dramatic, but the concept is ancient. A rocket stove is an efficient combustion device built around an L-shaped or J-shaped combustion chamber. You feed small pieces of wood, twigs, sticks, scrap lumber, horizontally into the bottom of the chamber. The heat draws air upward through the vertical section, creating a powerful, focused flame at the top. The design was formally studied and refined in the 1980s by engineer Larry Winiarski, who was working on fuel-efficient cooking solutions for developing nations. But the underlying principle, that a narrow, insulated burn chamber creates far more heat from far less fuel than an open fire, has been used informally for centuries. Building a basic rocket stove doesn't require a hardware degree. The classic construction uses standard concrete blocks or fire bricks arranged in an L shape. The horizontal section is where you feed the fuel. The vertical section is where the flame concentrates. Surround the combustion chamber with additional insulating material, sand, ash, more brick, and you dramatically increase efficiency. The reason rocket stoves use so little fuel is the same reason a bellows was invented. Concentrated oxygen and heat produce complete combustion. A traditional campfire wastes most of its energy as smoke and sideways heat. A rocket stove directs almost all of it upward. A few handfuls of dry wood can boil water in minutes. For indoor use, you need a proper chimney arrangement. Running a stovepipe through a window with a sealed collar, using metal flashing and high-temperature silicone, is the standard workaround. It's not elegant, but it works, and it keeps the combustion gases outside where they belong. This is not the kind of setup you want to improvise at 2 a.m. in a blackout. Build it before winter. Test it outside first. Know what you're doing. The fuel requirements are also worth thinking through in advance. A rocket stove is specifically designed for small diameter wood. Sticks and twigs in the 1 to 2 inch range burn most efficiently in the combustion chamber. Large logs don't feed properly and reduce efficiency significantly. This means a small stockpile of dry sticks, something most people with any yard space can accumulate for free, is a more useful fuel supply than a cord of firewood if a rocket stove is your plan. The trade-off is storage. Keeping enough dry, small diameter wood on hand through a long storm takes more planning than it sounds. Method 7. Sand-filled canister heaters. This method goes back to the early 20th century, particularly common in rural farmhouses and fishing cabins across Scandinavia and coastal New England. The principle is dead simple. A metal container, a large tin can, a paint can, even an old cooking pot, is filled roughly 2/3 with clean, dry sand. A wick is inserted down through the center. The wick is soaked in lamp oil or kerosene. You light the wick, and you have a slow-burning, stable heat source that lasts far longer than any candle. The sand serves two purposes. It acts as a reservoir that keeps the oil evenly distributed around the wick, and it provides thermal mass, absorbing and slowly radiating heat even after the flame is out. A properly assembled sand canister filled with a half-liter of lamp oil can burn for 12 to 16 hours continuously, depending on the wick size and the container. Lamp oil, also called paraffin oil, is the cleaner burning choice. Kerosene works but produces more odor and soot. Either way, you need ventilation. Not a wide-open window in January, but at least a cracked window or door to allow for gas exchange. The wicks themselves matter. Cotton rope, braided cotton twine, or dedicated oil lamp wicks from hardware stores all work. The thicker the wick, the larger the flame, and the more heat produced. You can trim it with scissors to control the output. This type of heater was standard equipment on working fishing boats well into the mid-20th century, precisely because it required no electricity, no pressurized fuel, and no moving parts. If it ran out, you refilled it. If it tipped over, which on a boat was a real concern, the sand contained most of the oil and slowed the spread. On land, in a stable position, it's a remarkably safe and practical device. Positioning matters more than most people realize. Placing the canister on a heat-resistant surface near the center of a small room, rather than against a wall, allows heat to radiate in all directions. Setting a simple metal shield, bent sheet metal, a folded cookie sheet, on 3 sides, directs more heat toward the occupied area of the room. It's a basic form of heat management that costs nothing and meaningfully improves the output. The same physics that applies to a fireplace with a back wall applies here. Method 6. The thermal mass bed warmer, hot rocks and clay bricks. People in cold climates heated their beds long before electric blankets. The method was almost universal across ancient Rome, medieval Europe, East Asia, and colonial North America. Heat a dense, non-porous object, a stone, a brick, a ceramic tile, and place it beneath the bed covers to radiate warmth for hours. Soapstone was the traditional favorite. It has an unusually high specific heat capacity, meaning it stores more thermal energy per unit of weight than most other stones, and it releases that heat slowly and evenly. Soapstone bed warmers, shaped like flattened bottles, were commercially manufactured in Vermont and New Hampshire through the late 1800s, sold specifically for this purpose. In the absence of soapstone, a standard clay brick works well. Heat it in an oven at around 300 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour, or place it near the coals of a fire. Wrap it in a towel or cloth, never place it directly on fabric, and never use a brick that has been exposed to water without fully drying it first. A wet brick can fracture explosively when rapidly heated, which is not the emergency you want on top of an already bad night. The wrapped brick goes under the covers at the foot of the bed, and it will keep that space noticeably warm for 3 to 5 hours. Some people heat 2 bricks and place one at mid-bed, one near the feet. It's low-tech, but on a night when the temperature inside the house drops into the 40s, the difference between cold sheets and pre-warmed sheets is not trivial. The same principle applies to water. A sealed metal water bottle filled with very hot water and wrapped in a wool sock or towel is a reliable personal heat source. It won't warm the room, but it will keep you warm, which is the point. It's also worth knowing which rocks to avoid. Porous rocks, particularly those collected from riverbeds or any stone that has been submerged in water, can contain trapped moisture inside microscopic cavities. When heated rapidly, that moisture expands as steam and can fracture the rock with considerable force. Granite, sandstone, and limestone all carry this risk to varying degrees depending on their history. Dense, non-porous stones, soapstone, basalt, quartzite are the correct materials. When in doubt, heat the rock very slowly and from a safe distance initially, watching for any cracking or popping sounds before getting close. The ancients who used heated stones knew this instinctively from experience. Modern people who skip the learning curve sometimes have to find out the hard way. Method 5. Interior tent sleeping, the room within a room method. This one is not a heating device, it's a strategy. And it's one of the most effective things you can do during a prolonged blackout in winter without using any fuel at all. The idea is to abandon the large, impossible-to-heat spaces in your home and consolidate everyone into the smallest possible interior room, ideally with no exterior walls if possible, like a central bathroom or interior bedroom. Then you layer that space with insulation. Hang blankets over doorways. Lay rugs or blankets on the floor. If you have a camping tent, pitch it inside the room and sleep inside it. The tent creates a secondary envelope that traps the warmth produced by human bodies, which generate about 80 to 100 watts of heat each at rest, roughly equivalent to a standard light bulb. Body heat is genuinely significant in an enclosed space. A family of 4 in a well-insulated tent, inside a small interior room with sleeping bags rated for cold temperatures, can maintain a comfortable sleeping temperature, even when outdoor temperatures drop well below freezing. This is the method that survival instructors and cold climate emergency managers consistently recommend as the first action, before candles, before improvised heaters, before anything else, because it requires no fuel and carries no fire risk. You are working with what your body already produces. The tent, the blankets, and the sealed room just keep it from escaping. As wilderness survival instructor Mors Kochanski said, the best survival tool is the knowledge in your head. Knowing that your body is a heat generator and that your only job is to keep that heat contained changes your entire approach to a cold emergency. People also underestimate the contribution of pets in this context, which sounds mildly absurd until you're actually cold. A dog or cat generates body heat the same way a human does, and in a tight sleeping space, that contribution is not nothing. Farm families sleeping with animals in winter, a practice common across many cultures for centuries, were not being primitive, they were being practical. A large dog sleeping at the foot of the bed produces somewhere around 40 to 70 watts of heat continuously. In a well-sealed tent inside a cold room, that's a meaningful addition to the thermal budget. Layering of the space matters too. If you're using the room within a room method, the floor is a major point of heat loss because the ground below is a massive thermal sink. Lay everything available between your body and the floor: foam sleeping pads, folded blankets, rugs, sofa cushions. The R value of your floor insulation directly determines how long the warmth you generate stays with you. Method 4. Oil lamp heating. The oil lamp is one of the oldest heating and lighting tools in human history. It predates recorded civilization. For almost all of human existence, people burned animal fats, plant oils, and eventually petroleum distillates in shallow dishes or enclosed containers to produce light and warmth. A single oil lamp doesn't produce dramatic amounts of heat, but several positioned around a small room contribute meaningfully to ambient temperature, especially when the room is well sealed. In a small space, under 150 square feet, 3 or 4 oil lamps burning simultaneously can raise the temperature by 5 to 8 degrees over outdoor conditions. The basic construction is unchanged from antiquity: a reservoir for fuel, a wick that draws the fuel up through capillary action, and a controlled flame at the top. Modern oil lamps typically burn lamp oil or kerosene and include a glass chimney that both protects the flame and directs combustion gases upward. Olive oil, coconut oil, and other plant-based oils can also be burned in a simple open lamp, a small dish with a wick made from twisted cotton. These burn more slowly and at lower temperatures than refined lamp oil, which means less heat output, but also less risk, and essentially no toxic fumes. Ancient households across the Mediterranean burned olive oil lamps for light and secondary warmth for thousands of years. As with any open flame in an enclosed space, ventilation is the non-negotiable rule. Carbon monoxide accumulates gradually and silently. A battery-powered CO detector is a piece of safety equipment that belongs in every emergency kit, more urgently than almost anything else if you're planning to use combustion for heat. The history of oil lamp design is also a history of incremental safety improvements. The argon lamp, developed in 1780 by Swiss chemist Aimé Argan, introduced a cylindrical wick and glass chimney that dramatically improved combustion efficiency and reduced smoke. The flat wick lamp that followed later in the 19th century simplified the design further. These improvements were not cosmetic. They were driven by the real-world problem of people asphyxiating or burning down their homes with poorly designed lamps. The lessons from that long design history are baked into every modern oil lamp on the market, which is why buying a properly designed lamp is almost always a better choice than improvising one, unless improvising is genuinely your only option. Method 3. Insulated survival sleeping bags and vapor barrier liners. There's an important distinction between warming a room and warming a person. When the power is out in the dead of winter, the most efficient thing you can do is stop trying to heat the air and start focusing on insulating yourself directly. Modern sleeping bags rated to below 0 temperatures are extraordinary insulation devices. A quality down bag rated to -20 degrees Fahrenheit will keep a human body comfortable in conditions that would be genuinely life-threatening without it. These are not novelty items. They are engineered tools. The vapor barrier liner technique adds another layer of efficiency that most people don't know about. A vapor barrier, typically a thin plastic bag or a purpose-made liner, is placed inside the sleeping bag, between your skin and the insulation. This sounds uncomfortable, and honestly, it takes some getting used to, but it prevents your body moisture from saturating the insulation. Wet insulation loses much of its effectiveness. A vapor barrier keeps the down or synthetic fill dry, maintaining its loft and warmth for far longer. Military cold weather sleeping systems, like the U.S. Army's ECWCS sleep system, use this principle. The design consists of a light inner bag, a heavier outer bag, and a bivy shell, all usable in combination or separately depending on temperature. For a blackout winter emergency at home, the application is simpler. High-rated sleeping bag, wool underlayers, a knit hat, because a significant portion of body heat escapes through the head, and a vapor barrier liner if you have one. In a sealed room with other people, This combination is genuinely enough to sleep safely in temperatures well below freezing without any additional heat source. One commonly overlooked factor is caloric intake during cold exposure. Your body burns considerably more energy maintaining core temperature in the cold than in temperate conditions. If you are relying heavily on body heat as your primary warming strategy, eating more, particularly fats and complex carbohydrates, gives your metabolism the fuel it needs to generate that heat. This is why historical Arctic and polar explorers consumed diets that would seem absurdly high-calorie by modern standards. The extra food wasn't a luxury, it was fuel. During a winter blackout emergency that extends beyond a day or two, keeping food intake up is as important as the insulation layers. Don't let rationing instincts work against your body's heating system. Method 2. The buddy burner. Corrugated cardboard and wax. The buddy burner is a specific piece of DIY equipment with a long history in scouting, camping, and emergency preparedness. It's made from two basic materials that almost everyone has at home: corrugated cardboard and wax. You cut strips of corrugated cardboard, the kind with visible channels running through it, and coil them tightly inside a shallow metal tin, like a tuna can or an Altoids tin. The corrugated channels face upward. You then melt wax, old candles, paraffin wax blocks, even crayons in an emergency, and pour it slowly over the cardboard coil until it saturates the channels and fills the tin. You let it cool completely. To use it, you simply light the exposed edge of the cardboard. The wax melts slowly, wicks up through the corrugated channels, and feeds the flame continuously. A single tuna can buddy burner filled with cardboard and wax burns for 2 to 4 hours. A larger paint can version lasts considerably longer. The heat output is real, enough to cook food on top, to heat a small tent, or to warm hands and feet in a vehicle. During World War II, buddy burners were widely used in civilian emergency preparedness kits across the United States, and the design has remained essentially unchanged since because it works and because the materials are universally available. A number 10 can, the large institutional cans used for coffee or canned goods, can be converted into a simple stove with holes punched for airflow, and the buddy burner sits inside it. The can acts as a windbreak and a heat concentrator, and the whole assembly can be built in under 20 minutes from household materials. The fuel is the key advantage here. Wax doesn't evaporate, doesn't leak, and doesn't go bad. A stock of old candles, a brick of Gulf wax from the hardware store, or even the accumulated wax drippings from years of candle use are all perfectly adequate. This is exactly the kind of supply that costs almost nothing to maintain and becomes invaluable when the alternative is no heat at all. There's also a practical advantage for families with children during emergency situations. Making buddy burners is a project that keeps kids occupied and gives them a sense of agency in a stressful situation. The materials are non-toxic, and the assembly process, coiling the cardboard, pouring the wax, is straightforward enough for a 10-year-old to participate in meaningfully. Emergency preparedness instructors in the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America have included buddy burner projects in curriculum for decades precisely because the skill is practical, the lesson sticks, and the result is immediately useful. Something you make yourself is something you understand, and something you understand is something you can actually rely on. Method 1. Passive solar heating through windows. Trapping daytime warmth. This one only works during the day, but in a multi-day blackout during winter, it can provide hours of meaningful warmth from nothing but sunlight. No fuel, no fire, no risk. The technique is straightforward. On any south-facing window, in the northern hemisphere, you remove curtains and blinds during daylight hours and allow sunlight to enter the room unobstructed. Glass transmits shortwave solar radiation readily, but it blocks the longer-wave infrared radiation that the room's contents then re-emit as heat. This is the greenhouse effect in miniature, and it's not trivial. A room with large south-facing windows on a clear winter day can gain 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above outdoor temperature from solar gain alone, even when outdoor temperatures are near freezing. Dark-colored floors, walls, and furniture absorb more heat than light-colored surfaces and re-radiate it into the room air more effectively. As soon as the sun drops, you reverse the process, hang thick blankets, curtains, or any available insulating material over every window. Glass is an extremely poor insulator. A single pane of glass has an R value of about 0.9 compared to a well-insulated wall at R20 or higher. Covering windows at night dramatically slows heat loss. This technique is the foundation of passive solar home design, which architects began formalizing in the 1970s following the energy crisis. Edward Mazria's 1979 book, The Passive Solar Energy Book, became a foundational reference, documenting how properly oriented windows and thermal mass could heat a home with zero fuel. The principles apply equally to an emergency situation. Combine passive solar gain with the room-within-a-room tent method and quality sleeping bags, and you have a genuinely functional cold weather survival strategy that relies entirely on things you likely already own. There's an additional trick that many people don't think about: dark-colored bottles filled with water placed on south-facing windowsills in sunlight. The water absorbs solar energy throughout the day and re-emits it slowly through the evening. This is thermal mass storage at the smallest possible scale. The same principle used in large passive solar buildings, shrunk down to something you can set up with empty plastic bottles from your recycling bin. It's not a major heat source, but in combination with everything else, it's another layer. And in a prolonged cold emergency, layers are everything. The broader lesson across all 10 of these methods is the same. Heat management is as important as heat generation. Generating warmth without managing where it goes is like filling a bathtub with the drain open. Seal the room, insulate the floor, cover the windows at night, concentrate people in small spaces. Let passive solar do what it can during the day. Use combustion sources to supplement, not to substitute for good thermal strategy. The people who stayed warmest through long winters without central heating weren't the ones burning the most fuel. They were the ones wasting the least. None of these methods are glamorous. Some of them are downright old-fashioned, but they all have one thing in common: they work, and they've been working for people long before the modern power grid existed. The grid is convenient until it isn't, and when it goes down in January, what you know matters a lot more than what you can order online. If this video was useful to you, hit the like button. It actually helps more people find this kind of content, and these are the kinds of things worth knowing. Subscribe if you want more videos on practical skills, forgotten knowledge, and the kind of information that used to be common sense before it got lost somewhere along the way. Stay warm out there.